The rain had started just past sundown, a slow, steady drizzle that turned the streets of Whitendale into glistening rivers of light. Lampposts glowed golden through the fogged air, and puddles reflected the brick buildings like blurry mirrors. It was the kind of evening where people rushed home, craving warm blankets and steaming cups of tea. But for Ellie Bennett, the town librarian, this was her favorite time of day. Ellie had worked at the Whitendale Public Library for nearly 10 years. The building itself was ancient, built in 1893, with creaky hardwood floors, spiral staircases, and grand arched windows that rattled in the wind. Most found it eerie after sunset, but Ellie found it comforting. The bookshelves held more than stories. They held whispers of time, of memories, and of lives lived and imagined. She stood by the front desk, her sweater sleeves pulled down over her palms as she watched the rain tap against the tall windows. The library was closed, the last patron having left nearly an hour ago. Only the soft hum of the radiator and the occasional pop of old wood expanding in the damp air kept her company. She exhaled deeply and looked around the quiet, warm space. This was her sanctuary. Every Thursday evening, Ellie stayed late to restock shelves and catalog returns. The storm outside gave her a perfect excuse to take her time. She moved between the aisles with practiced ease, pushing the return cart, slipping each book into its rightful place. Occasionally, she'd pause to skim a passage from a novel or smile at a note left behind by a previous reader. She loved those quiet connections. As the clock neared 9, Ellie made her way to the second floor, where the older, lesser-used books were kept. These were the ones bound in faded leather and cloth, books that smelled like time itself. She climbed the spiral staircase with a mug of chamomile tea in one hand, her flashlight tucked under her arm in case the overhead lights flickered again. They had a habit of doing that when the weather turned. The second floor always felt different. Not scary exactly, but like stepping into a slower time. The air was thicker, the silence heavier. Ellie moved down the aisle marked Local Histories, placing a few thin volumes back where they belonged. One slipped from her hand and landed with a dull thud on the carpet. As she bent to pick it up, she noticed something odd. There, at the very end of the row, was a soft, flickering light. A lantern? No, that wasn't right. The library didn't use lanterns. Ellie squinted and stood, her heart giving a curious little flutter. The light hovered, faint and golden, barely noticeable. She walked toward it slowly, careful not to make a sound. As she neared the end of the aisle, the light blinked out, vanishing as if it had never been there. She looked around. Nothing. Just the books, the rain outside, and the deepening quiet. Ellie chuckled to herself. Maybe she was more tired than she thought. She shook her head, returned the last book, and turned to head back downstairs. And then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of a page turning. Not a rustle, not the wind. A crisp, deliberate page turn, just behind her. She froze. It happened again. Ellie turned slowly, her breath caught in her throat. No one. She was completely alone. Or so she thought. There, on the table at the end of the aisle, lay a book. One that hadn't been there before. Its pages fluttered gently, though there was no breeze. The cover was unfamiliar. Handbound. No title. She approached it with cautious curiosity, drawn to it like a moth to light. The paper looked old, the ink faded. She reached out and gently touched the cover. The moment her fingers brushed the leather, a wave of calm washed over her. Not fear. Not dread. Something else. Like remembering a dream long forgotten. She opened the book. There was no text, only a single pressed flower, pale blue, delicate, and beneath it a name handwritten in graceful script. Lillian Hartley. 1902. Ellie's brow furrowed. She'd never seen this book before. Lillian Hartley. Why did that name sound familiar? She closed the book and picked it up, carrying it down to her desk. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, and the rain intensified against the windows. She set the book on the desk and pulled out her laptop, searching the library's archives for the name. It didn't take long. Lillian Hartley had once been the head librarian. She'd taken the post in 1899, when the building first opened. She was known for her brilliance, her fierce devotion to the written word, and her tragic story. In 1906, during a storm much like this one, she had stayed late cataloging books. The next morning, the staff found her in the upstairs reading room. She'd passed away in her sleep, head resting on a book of poetry. Some said she died of a broken heart. Others whispered she'd been waiting for someone who never returned. But all agreed on one thing. Lillian had loved the library more than anything else. Ellie sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. The book before her was over a century old. And yet here it was, untitled, uncatalogued, waiting. She glanced around the empty space. It didn't feel empty anymore. The soft sound of rain lulled her thoughts into a gentle haze. She picked up the book again and opened it to the pressed flower. As she turned the pages, words began to appear, not printed, but forming in real time, as though an invisible pen were writing them just for her. At first she panicked, but the fear dissolved when she read the words. "Thank you for remembering me." Ellie's hands trembled slightly. She whispered, "Lillian?" More ink formed. "I never left." The air shifted. Not colder, just fuller. A sense of presence. Of kindness. Ellie wasn't alone. But she wasn't in danger, either. She sat with the book for a long while, watching messages appear. Stories of old Whitendale, of library memories, of lost loves and poems half-written. The ghost of Lillian Hartley, it seemed, had been waiting for someone who loved the library as much as she did. And now, she had found her. That night, the storm howled outside. But inside the library, it was warm and full of light. Ellie eventually curled up on the old reading couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, the mysterious book resting on her chest. In her dreams, she walked through the library as it was in 1902, guided by a woman in a long blue dress, her hair pinned up, her eyes kind and wise. Lillian showed her shelves that no longer existed, whispered titles of books long gone, and recited poetry in a voice that sounded like rain on glass. When Ellie woke, the rain had stopped. The book was gone. In its place was a fresh flower, blue, delicate, and a small handwritten note. "I'll be here. Always. Share the stories." From that day on, Ellie began collecting the stories Lillian whispered to her in dreams. Some came through faint ink on forgotten pages. Others were glimpses during quiet nights. Patrons began noticing how the library felt different, warmer, more inviting. Children said they saw a kind lady in an old-fashioned dress waving at them from the second floor. Elders found books they had lost decades ago reappearing on shelves. And every Thursday night, Ellie stayed late, her tea steaming, the rain tapping gently on the windows, and the ghost of Lillian Hartley sitting quietly nearby, whispering stories that had waited 100 years to be told. In Whitendale, the library never truly closed. Not to those who loved it. Not to those who listened closely in the quiet rain.